1.8 left to go. Piper struggling with the inbound. Almost a 5-second violation. Here's a three from midcourt and misses. The Rice Owls are headed to the American Conference title game.
It's the Jordan Smith Show. And now, it's Jordan Smith.
Hey there once again, everybody. Welcome to another edition of the Jordan Smith Show. Hope you are having, or at least had, that is, a great Memorial Day weekend, and hope you're having a great day so far here on this Tuesday. Today's episode, we're going to lean in a little bit towards something that at least I have more experience in, which is play-by-play. There's a lot of people who I have talked to over the years, and people who have come up and asked me, and of course this is a general question for anybody trying to get into play-by-play. How do you start? What do I do to get the job that you have? So on and so forth. How do I get the opportunities that you have? It's kind of an interesting conversation. It's really a lot simpler than you think. But before we get into that, please do not forget to go ahead and subscribe or follow whatever the button is on the app that we have here to the podcast. So that way you won't miss any episode. Of course, now this podcast on not just Spotify, but also on Apple Podcast and YouTube Music. So if you're listening from any of the other two platforms or it's still on Spotify, thanks again for joining us, or at least me, that is. But either way, let's get into today's topic. How to get started. And of course, you could have that thought of wanting to get started, wanting to do it, and it's great. But as soon as you get into the situation of starting, that's when it can become very nerve-wracking. And that's not uncommon. Doing it for the first time is going to be scary. It's going to be nervous. It's going to give you a little anxiety. That's okay. My advice? Just power through it and do it anyway. Now, for me, my approach is I'm a guy who basically throw yourself into the fire and figure it out as you go along, right? That's how my career started. I was a student at Baylor University for a year, not an hour. Felt like an hour, but for a year before I transferred to Sam Houston State University, where I would graduate. But during that year at Sam Houston, I worked for the school paper, the Baylor Lariat, and they also had this online streaming program called Baylor Lariat Radio that did sports broadcasting, sports weekly show, all of that kind of stuff. And I had asked the media advisor for the paper and said, hey, would I be able to broadcast baseball? Because originally at that time, I went into college as an English major. I was going to work at book publishing, and I worked at the paper just to not have that regret when I'm 70 years old and sitting around going, man, I wish I would have at least done it while having the opportunity so I don't regret it. That's the same thing with baseball. Never thought I'd be a sports broadcaster. Never thought I'd be able to get into it. So I said, hey, while I'm here, let me at least see if it's possible so I can live out that dream of calling baseball on the radio. Well, what was radio, right? They said, yeah, as long as you can get the baseball team to approve it, go for it. I said, okay, great. So got that all taken care of. And about 2 weeks before the basketball season started in the beginning of November that year, in the fall of 16, just to give you kind of a time frame, the same media advisor came to me and said, hey, we need somebody to call Baylor Lady Bear basketball. Would you want to do play-by-play? And of course, remember, I had never done play-by-play in my entire career. I never broadcasted in my entire career. It was my media career, quote unquote, besides the sports blog that I had before I got to Baylor, which is what actually got me the job at Baylor with the paper. But basically, if you just look at the paper career, I'd been there for maybe, what would that be? 3 months. And they were asking me to be the next play-by-play guy for their online streaming platform. And I said, well, I mean, why not? You know? It'll help me a little bit, get me trained up and ready to go for baseball season, which is what I was more focused on. But also, basketball is a sport that I grew up with. It was basically my first love, with baseball right there at 1B, basically basketball 1A, baseball 1B, right? I always had dreams of going to the NBA. That didn't work for multiple reasons, but yeah, I took the offer. And again, that's something that I'll talk about later on as some tips for the beginners. But I did that, right? And went through it, did my first year, and it opened doors for a whole bunch of things. So a long-winded thing, just if you're nervous about doing it, you're going to be nervous. Just do it. You're never going to have another first broadcast. So just do it. Just enjoy the moment. Soak it all in, because you never know where your career will go from there. Another tip for you on how to get started: find out what sport that you know the most, right? Because part of sports broadcasting is knowing the ins and outs of the sport, knowing the rules almost like the back and front of your hand, understanding formations, understanding runs, understanding what will happen in what situation. That helps you a lot with conveying that message to the audience in the correct manner of what to maybe expect, what you're going to see, what you are seeing, and how impactful what you are seeing is on the court in regards to time, score, or just game planning in general, right? So find out what sport you like the most and practice with those. And I guess some tips, because obviously you're not going to be able to have that same experience as I did, where I was just kind of right place, right time. If you're wanting to get started and you're at home and you're trying to figure out how to get started, maybe you're out of college, maybe you're in high school, wherever you are, my advice, and something that I have always struggled with, I tried to do this, but it didn't work for me. I know a lot of people who have done this and it's worked for them, is to either pull up a video game that you have, Madden, NBA 2K, MLB The Show, whatever it is, soon to be EA, College Football 25. Man, I cannot wait for that to release. Or even go to YouTube, find some old games, and just sit there and just start calling the game. Record it, obviously, so you can listen back to it, learn some mistakes that you made, and learn from those, try to get better from those, and work on certain things, send it to people to critique, so on and so forth, right? But make sure you record, either pull up old games on YouTube, pull up a game that's currently happening on TV and do it, or just get an old video game and do that as well. Another idea, and for some people this works, you may need to get a little experience first in order to make it work, is to email some teams and see about getting permission to take an empty booth at a game, if there is one, and bring a recorder with you, whether you actually go and get a recorder off of Amazon, and not the recorder that you played in 5th grade choir. I'm talking about an actual audio recording machine, or just use your phone. Either one works, and go to the stadium and call a game on your recorder, just so that way you have something to at least build off of, right? But like I said, you probably need a little more experience in order to be able to get that opportunity. But hey, send an email. You never know that could happen. What's the worst that could happen? You email, they say no, and it's over with. So kind of going into that, it leads into some tips that I want to give for beginners. And again, I am not the only person you should, listen to when it comes to starting your career. There are a ton of great broadcasters in the industry. I'm still young in the industry at only 7.5 years of experience, like I detailed in the trailer episode for this podcast, but I at least want to take what I've learned and pass it on to you, so you are in a much faster start than what I was, and you're not learning things 5 years into your career that you can learn 5 minutes into your career, not 5 years like I did. So here's some tips. In order to open more opportunities for yourself, especially in the beginning, which is where you are right now, trying to get a start, is get your own equipment. It's going to cost a lot of money to do so, obviously. But if you can save up, if you can ask for stuff for Christmas, birthdays, things like that, that'll help. Because that's how I built a lot of my setup, was for a good 3 or 4 year stretch, getting the big and more expensive components for birthdays, for Christmas, things like that, and sacrificing other things I may have wanted just to build my own kit. Because I tell you what, and I'll get into a story here about why it's important to get your own equipment. You never know what freelance opportunities in whatever sport, multiple sports even, or what jobs will come up because of it. The job I have right now as a radio broadcaster for Rice women's basketball coverage on their Learfield platform started as a freelance opportunity 3 years ago, it feels like now. It was the spring of 2022 is when I first started doing games for them. It was only 2 a season for spring of 22, spring of 23, during crossover between basketball and baseball to help with all the fluctuating schedules, trying to cover, they only had 2 broadcasters, so trying to cover all of that, right? And help fill the gap a little bit. I had my own equipment, so it helped them a lot when it came to equipment, when it came to operation. They didn't have to then take out their stuff and leave it there. I had my own equipment that I had been building and was still building up until this last year to take to these games and do these things. Of course, I've used my own equipment for other high school jobs. In fact, the high school job I have right now that I've had for the last 3 years now, I've used my own equipment for every single broadcast pretty much, with the exception of a couple. I mean, so having your own equipment will help tremendously. And then, of course, the whole Rice thing, where now I am a actual Rice radio broadcaster for them for their basketball coverage, doing road games and stuff. Again, I have my own equipment. I didn't need to get a set from Rice. I didn't need to borrow things from them. I had my own equipment, and I knew it worked because I've been using it, building that kit for about a 5-6 year span, probably a 6-year span, in fact. So it's definitely possible. Again, you just have to sacrifice a few Christmas and birthday gifts here and there. But if you want to at least go about it the cheap way, if you got the money to go get stuff, then go Amazon right now and go buy all the stuff. But basically, I would say get your own equipment, because that's going to be one way that is going to help you out a lot when it comes to freelance opportunities, getting jobs at the beginning of your career, so on and so forth. Which leads me into my next tip. Take any job that is offered to you. Like I detailed in my story about how my experience got started with doing Baylor baseball and then them coming up to me and asking me if I wanted to do women's basketball, and I said yes. That's because, well, one, it was Baylor Lady Bear basketball when Kim Mulkey was there, so why wasn't I going to take it? That was a free trip to the Elite Eight, which I did get to broadcast. That was pretty cool. But if I had said no, I probably would not be where I am in my career. Just because I said yes to that one broadcast opportunity. Was I scared? Absolutely, because it was the first time putting on a headset. But guess what? It landed me where I am today because that was my launching platform to then get to where I am through learning, through growing, to getting other opportunities in the high school space, so on and so forth. But take any job that is offered to you. You never know what could actually happen with that job. And it may not be a play-by-play job, but it may be something in production. You may be a spotter. You may be an analyst. You may be an engineer. You may be an intern. It doesn't matter. It helps you build connections with people at those companies. It helps you learn from them to build your craft, to work on your skill, and also help you potentially when it comes to jobs later on in your career, whether maybe they recommend a job for you that they find or they know of, or they have a letter recommendation for you, a reference, whatever the case may be. Take any job that is offered to you and run with it, because you never know where it could land you later on in your career. A final tip for beginners. And again, this is relatable for me because I got my start in college. If you are a college student, that is a prime, and I mean prime, opportunity, and you need to take advantage of it. If you are a college student right now when you're listening to this, go find a broadcast job right now. Now, you have to understand, you're not going to find one that pays, especially if you're doing student broadcasting. That is okay. You're getting experience that's going to get you a job and that you can put on a resume. Go do it. Find student broadcast opportunities with your athletic department, student radio station, online streaming, whatever it is. Like I said, it'll boost your resume tremendously when you graduate from college because you will have that experience. I can tell you firsthand, especially my Sam Houston experience. Yes, my Baylor experience helped a lot because it got me a job as a student at Sam Houston before I even walked into my dorm that I stayed in that first year that I was there as a student. I got a job with the student production group for all the ESPN broadcasts as well as on-air talent before I stepped foot on campus because of my experience in Baylor. So take advantage if you're in college. Go ask the athletic department if there are any opportunities for students. If you have a student radio station, whether it's an FM, an AM, or an online only, go talk and see about finding something that is there for you. Even if you have to go outside of the college and you have to go find a high school job, that is fine. There are abundance of high school opportunities as well, so go take advantage of that. But if you can find an opportunity to broadcast college athletics, whether you're NCAA, Division I, Division II, Division III, NJCAA, NAI, whatever it is, if you are in college and there is an opportunity there, whether it's student radio, athletic department, online shirt, whatever, go get your name in there. Even if you have to do maybe a production role to start and then work your way into a play-by-play or an analyst role or a sideline report, that is fine. But at least get your name in there, get your foot in the door, and get that started. Because again, that will be huge for you, especially when you're trying to get a job right out of college because you have all that experience right out the gate. Now, some final thoughts here to kind of wrap up. You're not going to sound perfect when you first start out. That's okay. Nobody's asking you to be perfect. Nobody's asking you to sound like Vince Scully. And if you don't know who Vince Scully is, you need to look him up. One of the greatest storytellers to have ever existed in sports broadcasting, if not the best storyteller to have ever existed on a play-by-play mic. Don't set the expectation of sounding tremendous and sounding perfect right away. It takes time to find your voice and to develop your craft. I know I can speak from experience. Just looking and listening back to the first couple of games I ever did with Baylor Lady Bear basketball for the Lariat radio program to how I sound now, miles different. And the more you go into this career and the more you do broadcasting is the more that you will hear that difference in your voice, in your style, in your delivery, in everything you do with the headset or with the mic, whichever you prefer. But it's going to take time to find your voice, to develop your craft, so on and so forth. So don't worry about trying to sound perfect right away because it's not going to happen right away. And again, that is okay. And also, be open to critiques and develop a thick skin, because if you don't have a thick skin and you take offense to things lightly, this is not the career for you. When people are going to critique your work and give you constructive criticism, it's to help build you up. It's to help work on your craft, get you to where we all want to be, which is in the professional realm or at the college realm someday, right? Be open to critiques. Be open to constructive criticism, because it's only going to help you. And especially if you make those connections with some professional broadcasters, all they're trying to do is help you, right? They want to see you get better. They want to help you with your career. So be open to critiques. Develop a thick skin, because there's going to be things that you're going to hear from critiques that you're not going to like. It may upset you, and that's okay. I know I've had my fair share of hearing that from people, and that is okay. That is perfectly okay, because if I had not heard those, then I would not have developed my skill. I would not be in the position where I am today. And also, like I said, it's going to take time to find your voice, develop your craft. Be patient when you're starting out. Opportunities, when you're searching for them, they may not show up right away. Again, that's okay. It's going to take time to create some opportunities. Some may come faster than others, and that's fine. But like I said, if there's no play-by-play, then ask about production. Ask about engineering. Ask about behind the scenes. Ask about being an intern. Ask about being the coffee guy. Whoever, whatever it is, just get your foot in the door. Get your name out there. Meet these people. Get the connections. And just try to start building on that opportunity. So whenever they do call your name eventually, you will be ready to go. You will have a perfect opportunity to start. And you won't be worrying about whether you're ready or not, because guess what? You are ready because you've worked for all that time, because you've built the rapport with everybody there, because you've developed your craft behind the scenes while working with these people. So your opportunity that you want, your perfect opportunity, may not and probably will not show up right out of the gate. That is perfectly fine. That is perfectly okay. It's going to take some time. You got to be patient with it. And I can tell you firsthand, and I've seen some other college graduates have frustration with this as well. When you graduate college, be patient. Unless you have, the connection of every Emmy Award-winning broadcaster in the nation, it may take you a little bit of time to find that job that you're looking for right after walking the stage and getting your college degree, whether it be bachelor's, master's, or whatever it is. It may take a little time, and that is okay. Just make sure that you are taking advantage of that time while you're looking for that job, and you are still broadcasting in some form or fashion so you don't get rusty, and so that you can continue to build a demo reel, continue to build experience, so whenever that job does come up, you can say, oh, I have this extra year and a half, 2 years, whatever it is, 5 months, whatever, a professional out of college experience from doing this. So make sure that you keep yourself fresh. You are patient, you stay with it, and you don't get too frustrated, because again, you never know what could happen, where it could happen, when it could happen. But as long as you stick with it while waiting for that opportunity and you work on stuff behind the scenes and everything else, you'll be ready when your name is called, and you will shine and get more opportunities because of it. I think that's a good spot to end on here, folks. So that'll do it for today's episode of The Jordan Smith Show. Again, like I mentioned at the top of the podcast, if you have not done so yet, subscribe to the podcast, hit the follow button, whatever it is on your platform, here on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or on YouTube Music, whichever one of those three you're listening on. I appreciate you for tuning in. Again, we will have a new episode every Tuesday afternoon is when these will be released, right at about 2 p.m.-ish every Tuesday. So make sure, and that's 2 p.m. Central or 2 p.m. Texas time if you want to get specific on where that is. But either way, look, when you're in the Central, yes, it's Central Chicago, but in Texas, everything runs on Texas time. I can't explain it to you. That's just how Texas works. And if you're not from Texas, it's hard to explain. If you are from Texas, you're nodding your head and saying, yep, completely understand. Now, when am I going to go to Buc-ee's? But either way, subscribe to the podcast, follow the podcast so you don't miss any uploads on this podcast whatsoever. You can check out all of my social media pages down in the description below as well. I do have a Patreon page. I'm trying to create some more content for y'all behind the scenes, getting a look into how I prep for games, doing live Q&As, things like that as well. If you're wanting your own work critiqued as well, always reach out to me. That will always be free. I will never charge for that. I know some broadcasters do, and that's their own right. They're able to do that if they wish, but I will never charge for critiquing work or giving constructive criticism. We're trying to help build your reels, build your career, so on and so forth. So if you want that, or you just want to reach out and talk about the show a little bit, then you can go to any of my socials as well. Again, check out the Patreon. All of that is in the description. You can go to my own website, see some of the work I've done, look at my resume, so on and so forth. But again, subscribe to the podcast, so we'll see you back here next week. I'm pretty sure I've got an interview lined up for next week's show. I will keep it hush-hush for now, and once that gets confirmed and it gets recorded and all that, then I'll actually release and announce what the name of that person is. But for now, we'll keep it a little hush-hush. Make it a surprise for you. Why not? But again, thanks again for tuning in to this episode of The Jordan Smith Show. I will see you next Tuesday. I almost said next day. Next Tuesday, right back here at 2 p.m. So long, folks.
Listen to every episode of The Jordan Smith Show in audio form on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Open either app on your device and search The Jordan Smith Show. Then hit the follow button so you won't miss a single episode, which release every single Tuesday afternoon.